Okay, we'll start with this. Ahead of his upcoming 140-pound debut opposite the ring WBC champion Regis Prograis, Devin Haney tips his hat to Regis, saying, "I think he's the best at 140 pounds. I think Devin's got a fight to sell, and he's selling it. And what better way to sell it than telling people you're fighting the best guy at the weight?"
Though whether or not he actually is the best is subject to some debate.
After Devin Haney thought long and hard over his options, he decided to leave his 4 lightweight titles at the door and invade the 140-pound division. If he wanted, Haney could have selected a bottom feeder for his debut. Instead, he's taking on who he considers to be the best fighter at 140 pounds in Regis Prograis. He's a big knockout puncher, and he's proven. Haney told Matchroom he's a proven champion in the 140-pound division. I think he's the best at 140, personally.
Is he?
I think he's one of the best. He's definitely one of the best fighters, one of the best champions, certainly better than Rolly Romero. I think that goes without saying. But whether or not he's the best at the weight is subject to some debate, because Regis was beaten years ago by Josh Taylor, and Josh Taylor was recently beaten by Teofimo Lopez.
So wouldn't that make Teofimo Lopez the best at the weight by way of the process of elimination?
And not Regis. Regis, who was last in action against the late replacement in Danielito Zorrilla, and, after the fight, nobody felt that he was the best guy at the weight, not based on that performance. Haney believes that Prograis simply had a bad night at the office. It happens. The former undisputed champion knows what Prograis brings to the table, from pernicious knockout power to relentless pressure. Haney is aware of it all. The 24-year-old won't have everything going in his favor on fight night. With that said, the top-notch skills that Prograis normally displays will be rendered useless come December 9th. I gotta go in there and handicap him of his best attributes, and that's what I'm going to do.
He's got the style for it.
If he can keep it long and loose and on the outside, managing the distance and limiting Regis's countering opportunities, he might just upset the apple cart for Regis. Regis Prograis, who believes he can still be the face of boxing, though some would say, now that he's in his mid-30s,
it's not likely.
Perhaps a highlight reel knockout of unbeaten Devin Haney might nudge him in that direction. There is a mythical title in the sport of boxing, one that comes without annoying sanctioning fees. Becoming the face of boxing is reserved for those who are wildly popular. Being a great fighter is also a component, but simply put, it isn't as important as being supremely admired. Currently, Canelo Alvarez and Gervonta Davis are head and shoulders above everyone in that department. Prograis, however, is looking to crash that exclusive party. "I really feel like I can be the face of boxing," Prograis told Fight Hub TV, or close to it in 2 fights. The second fight Prograis is referring to is an open-ended question, but he firmly believes that on December 9th, a star will be born.
Been talking a lot about who exactly is the face of boxing in boxing today. Here we'll talk about what is that? What is that exactly?
The face of boxing is the sports ambassador, the fighter that regularly garners the most attention for their fights. And the way you gauge that attention is by what money they generate. What money do the fights generate? What pay-per-view buys? What gates?
That's why you so often hear about a fighter's marquee value in tandem with whether or not he's the face of boxing.
Or she, because the interest that your fights generate shows up in the gate receipts and the pay-per-view buys. That if you are, in fact, the face of boxing, that's what the numbers are going to show consistently. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen after one fight.
You can get 2 fighters that perhaps aren't that big by themselves, though together they make for one big fight on one night.
But that is on one night for one fight. What distinguishes the face of boxing from a situation like that is the face of boxing consistently out-earns everyone, consistently produces big numbers.
Consistently, because it's consistency that determines who the face of boxing is, not just one fight on one night.
What are the odds that Regis Prograis could become the face of boxing in 2 or 3 fights like he specifies? Well, that depends. Let's restructure the question. Do you think that Regis Prograis is going to out-earn Canelo Alvarez in 2 to 3 fights?
He's going to become more popular than Canelo in just 2 or 3 fights?
Make more money than Canelo, get the corporate sponsorships and endorsements like Canelo. He's going to do all this with just 2 or 3 fights at 140 pounds?
How do you think the numbers for Prograis versus Haney are going to stack up with the numbers that Canelo just put up in a tune-up fight. A tune-up fight with Jermell Charlo.
Do you think that Prograis versus Haney is going to bring in excess of 600,000, 700,000 pay-per-view buys? Because if it's not, I hate to rain on Regis's parade, but it's not likely he becomes the face of boxing in just 1, 2, or even 3 fights.
It's not likely. He can give himself a profile boost by knocking out Devin Haney, and I suggest he does if he wants to keep the paydays rolling in, if he wants to keep the WBC title.
You don't want no funny business on the scorecards, and you don't want your fight and its outcome open to interpretation, the judge's interpretation. You better take it out of their hands unless you want to end up like Vasyl Lomachenko.
Comprendo, friendo.
Just in keeping with the theme of that conversation, the face of boxing and all of that. You know, Bob Arum very recently responded to a question as to whether or not Shakur Stevenson would have to go to the PBC the same way that Ryan did for a Gervonta Davis fight, to which Bob responded, Shakur doesn't have to go to the PBC because we control a lot of the money now.
He didn't elaborate upon that. He didn't specify, was he talking about their newly formed partnership with Turki Al-Ashik, or was he referencing Showtime's departure from the sport?
He didn't elaborate, though. In any event, Leonard Ellerbe caught wind of Bob's comments, and he said, Bob is a great promoter. He says he controls a lot of the money now, so he should go make the big fights for his fighters. He has a ton of good fighters, and he doesn't need to talk to anyone to get those fights made. PBC is putting on big fight after big fight. He can do the same.
It took you long enough.
It took you so long to put on big fight after big fight that now, after 37 years in the sport, Showtime may be leaving boxing. And Showtime was airing your content. They were airing your fights. So your fights couldn't have been so big and so great.
Couldn't have.
If they're leaving now. If they have decided that these fights and this content is not a big enough part of their bottom line. You guys waited too long to make the fights that people wanted. Too long to make the fights that mattered. Too little, too late.
Guys have basically run Showtime Boxing into the ground, and this clown is still patting himself on the back.
You really can't make it up, and this is the byproduct of ignorance and ego all rolled into a burrito.
A unique form of denial that sees the individual continue to aggrandize themselves as everything around them is falling apart.
Why is this guy so worried about what Gervonta Davis will or won't do? Who's got to go to whose side of the street for a fight when Gervonta's not with Mayweather Promotions anymore, right?
Right.
What Bob wants to do with that fighter isn't your problem. You're not his promoter, are you?
And what exactly is Leonard Ellerbe proposing? What exactly is he promoting? Division? More division in the sport. Division in the sport is what has led it to fade into the background of the American sporting world. Boxing used to be bigger than this.
He didn't say it outright. He didn't say it verbatim, but he's still doing the sides of the street routine, the sides of the street shtick. When Bob proposes that Shakur and Davis should fight,
What do you think he means?
he should go make the big fights for his fighters. He has a ton of good fighters, and he doesn't need to talk to anyone to get those fights made. Why wasn't that the demeanor when it came to Ryan Garcia? Why wasn't that the demeanor with him? But when Shakur is mentioned, you want Bob to keep his kids over there. You want Bob to keep Shakur on their own side of the street, fighting their own fighters. That's not what you told Ryan.
Ryan wasn't one of your fighters. Ryan wasn't on your side of the street, but you had no problem making a fight with him.
Leonard Ellerbe, who very recently stated that the fights that the fight fans think are big, like Davis versus Stevenson, are not big. Though if he's the face of boxing, if Gervonta Davis is the face of boxing, like some people say,
Why are you always saying we've got to pay you what you weigh? We've got to pay you what you weigh.
Caleb Plant didn't weigh $10 million, and neither did Jermell Charlo, 10 or 15 million, or whatever he made. These fighters were not making anywhere near that kind of money when Canelo fought them.
We got to pay you which way. We got to pay you which way.
Caleb Plant didn't weigh $10 million before he fought Canelo Alvarez, and he doesn't weigh that now that he has fought him. He was just on pay-per-view with David Benavidez.
The Canelo fight sold 800,000 pay-per-view buys on the Showtime platform. On that same platform, Caleb and David didn't come anywhere near that number.
Thus, Caleb clearly didn't weigh $10 million. He clearly wasn't a $10 million fighter. Apropos, the only reason he got $10 million was because he was in there with the face of boxing.
That's the year mark of the face of boxing. When you're in there with the face of boxing, you're going to end up making more money than you'd make with anyone and everyone else.
But I'm supposed to believe that it's not Canelo. Canelo's not the face of boxing. Gervonta Davis is the face of boxing, while Leonard Ellerbe says, we gotta pay you what you weigh. We gotta pay you what you weigh. So what are you, like the face of boxing on a budget? The face of EBT boxing?
Eat better today.
It doesn't make sense. You can't shout from the rooftops that Gervonta Davis is the face of boxing, then come up with reasons for him not to make offers to Shakur, offers to Teofimo, offers to Devin. Hell, he hasn't even made an offer to George.
Is he the face of boxing or is he not the face of fucking boxing? What's the holdup? What's the problem?
Yeah, he's the face of boxing until you ask him to start acting like it. He's the face of boxing until he's required to do what Canelo does all the time.
And these brain-dead mongoloids that follow him, that support Leonard Ellerbe and support Gervonta Davis, they're so brainwashed, they actually have an issue with what Bob is saying.
They think Bob Arum making that proposition that Shakur and Gervonta should fight makes him the bad guy. That's what's wrong with boxing. Boxers boxing other boxers.
You know what it is? It's that Wakanda thing that Coach Malachi's always talking about. They want to believe that the PBC is this Wakandan paradise.
They think they're part of this exclusive fucking society behind the brush, hidden away from the rest of the world. It makes them feel valued and special. This fucking delusion.
What kind of boxing fan gets upset at the prospect of two boxers boxing each other?
Remember when I told you years ago? The Spence fans didn't really want to see that Crawford fight. I'm telling you now. The Davis fans don't really want to see that Stevenson fight.
Listen, Gervonta Davis is not the face of boxing. Maybe he's the small intestine, the sphincter, the ass, but not the face.
And now as it pertains to Dimitri Bivol, the embattled WBA light heavyweight champion WBC head says Dimitri Bivol should have contacted him to appeal stance against Russian fighters. To my surprise, it seems that Dimitri has yet to file his paperwork. Last year, in response to Russia's aggression towards Ukraine, the WBC set down a strict ruling in which it would refuse to sanction any fights in Russia or Belarus and rank any Russian or Belarusian fighter for the duration of the Russia versus Ukraine conflict. The WBC's head, Mauricio Suleiman, took matters further when he publicly declared that his organization would not be involved in a potential light heavyweight full unification between Bivol and countryman Artur Beterbiev, who holds the WBC, WBA, and IBF titles, citing Bivol's nationality.
I thought the WBC's stance was stupid then. I still think it's stupid now. Your champion is no less Russian than Dimitri.
However, it's curious that after all this time, Dimitri Bivol still hasn't filed the necessary paperwork. That if you have that avenue to pursue, why haven't you yet? In a recent interview from Las Vegas, Suleiman seemed to suggest that there could have been an exception made for Bivol if Bivol had only reached out to him to address these issues. But Suleiman said no effort from Bivol or his representatives was made. We have explained consistently several times that Bivol has to contact the WBC and put his case forward, explaining why the WBC should not consider him Russian.
I can think of a few reasons why he may not want to do that, though that he hasn't initiated any contact. That all these months have gone by after they made their stance clear, and he hasn't reached out
to at least sit down with these people, give them your perspective, your side of things.
He ain't fought since the Zerto fight late last year.
We have explained consistently several times that Bivol has to contact the WBC and put his case forward, explaining why the WBC should not consider him Russian. Suleiman told Boxing News, because we do not allow any boxing in Russia or Belarus. We don't rank any boxers from Russia or Belarus, and we don't give any support to any activity of a WBC fight involving those two countries. He has never contacted the WBC for months. It's very simple. If he believes he's being mistreated and that we should have a different status, he should have reached out to us. I've said it many times.
Once again, I can think of a few reasons why a Russian national may not want to publicly denounce his nationality.
Because we don't know what the consequences might be, though I'm not Dimitri's publicist. I'm not here to explain things on his behalf. Ultimately, he should have contacted them. He should have at least talked to them.
He didn't.
And I think you'll be hard-pressed to find anyone at this point playing Dimitri Bivol the violin, as scandalous allegations are being levied against him by his ex-wife. She's claiming domestic battery. She's claiming domestic abuse.
Citing an incident that she says took place in May of this year, and that the children witnessed the whole thing.
These are serious allegations, and whatever Dimitri does in the ring does not excuse him from this kind of behavior outside of the ring. But that's if these accusations are true. I can't tell you that they are.
We don't know who either of these people are away from the cameras, outside of the public eye, whether you're talking about Dimitri or Dimitri's ex-wife.
I can't tell you. All I can tell you is Vadim Kornilov, Dimitri's longtime manager, says that Bivol is in camp, fight is in the works. We will have some news very soon.
What about the ex-wife stuff?
These are delicate matters that should always be handled with some reverence and some consideration for the actual victims of domestic abuse. Actual victims.
We gotta keep in mind is that there's two sides to every story, and hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. These two are divorced.
He made all that money from the Canelo Alvarez fight, and he had a very big year last year, perhaps the best year in his career, and things just went sideways for him. Was it the money?
They say money changes people.
But who changed? Was it Dimitri? Or was it Dimitri's wife? Ex-wife now.
I've seldom seen a fighter fall out of favor as quickly, as suddenly as Dimitri Bivol.
So soon after the best year of his boxing career, this turns out to be one of the worst years.
He ain't the only boxer with domestic issues. Teofimo's had some domestic issues with his ex-wife. Similar stuff.
It's not unusual in the sport of boxing, and this story is fresh, that she's doing this publicly.
She posted those pictures to her social media, her Instagram stories. But her account of events, no matter how egregious it may seem at first, her account is just one account. It's just one side of the story. You are innocent until proven guilty.
We don't know what his side is. We don't know what this is. We don't. So until we do, this is just a very awkward situation, a very awkward story that you gotta kind of step away from.
Vadim Kornilov says this guy's in camp and he's gearing up for a fight with who I don't know.
This recent turn of events may affect that.